Hey, Howard.
In case you need a lawyer, here's my business card. I'm attorney Howard Ankin.
Oh, hey, Howard.
If you or someone you know has been hurt at work, Ankin Law can get the medical bills paid, the lost wages reimbursed,
Oh, hey, Howard.
and the compensation you deserve.
Hey, Howard.
We're one of the largest filers throughout the state of Illinois of workers' compensation claims. We're here to help. Call 312-6-million. Injury law made personal, that's Ankin Law.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to a new episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Thursday night, July 24th, 2025. As we record this new show, the Chicago White Sox are playing their best baseball of the season. After a convincing sweep of the Pittsburgh Pirates during our annual road trip, the White Sox visited Tampa Bay this week, and the offense continues to mash. Despite losing on Tuesday, the White Sox made multiple comebacks on Wednesday and scored 6 runs in the 8th inning to win another road series. Yes, the White Sox have won back-to-back road series. This level of success now has the White Sox on pace to finish 58 and 104. Not great, but that's a 17-win improvement if they can achieve that, and score 599 runs. So why are the White Sox hitting so well? We'll discuss that. Plus, we are a week away from the MLB trade deadline, so some White Sox fans are getting a little antsy about Luis Robert Jr., if he will get traded or not. And this weekend is another crosstown classic as the Chicago Cubs visit the South Side. Jim Margulis is visiting the Charlotte Knights as they are playing in Nashville this week. So joining me in this podcast episode is Sox Machine's Bree reporter, it's James Fegan. And hello, James. It appears the 2000 White Sox are back. What was said in that team meeting prior to the Pirates series that has spurred the hitters to get into this massive hot streak at the plate?
Nothing that hasn't been said repeatedly. We tend to compress narratives a lot in sports media, but I think they've been kind of, I think the nature of this offense for a while now has been like, wow, the zone control is a lot better than it was last year. But that's not really like backed up by like half their production or slug mainly. It produced like more competitive looking at bats and like a team that looked like it was fighting, but it was like, pretty much the worst offense in the American League. Quite clearly, if not checking the work at the end of the first half and like trending in that very hard for like the first few months. And I think we're generally willing to chalk that up with, they're just not very talented. Like they can get good pitches, but they're just not going to do as much with them as other offenses. But I think Will Venable, and I think it really started to break through in the Texas road trip on Houston and Texas. Venable kind of publicly saying like this offense needs to be more aggressive against heaters in a way that, not that he sugarcoats things, but generally doesn't make a point of like listing off gripes for like, and he doesn't give it in like a call out sort of way, but just kind of when he injects like a subject matter that he thinks that they're deficient at on his own, it tends to be pretty telling. And it was certainly like, I think that Rangers bullpen game where, Sean Armstrong came out and was like, I pitched like 4 innings, just like blowing heaters in the zone past them. That was a point where like Venable made it public. And so you've been hearing it either hinted at by him or emphasized by different guys as something that's been being reiterated in the week since then. So that was mid-June leading up to here. Like that article I wrote about Josh Rojas, like was pretty much like the offense in a nutshell. Like he's chasing as little as any point in his career, but not doing stuff with his heaters. And that's why his offense has collapsed. Obviously the offense as a whole going through a more mild version of that up and down the lineup. So this was less because it's a team meeting in the sense that like they had a team meeting coming out of the All-Star break, rather than I think it would be less of a designation if just at a random point where they got shut out. Like they locked all the doors and said, fastballs, damn it. So I think this was like a reiteration of what they really wanted to do coming out of the second half, something they've been harping on for a month. And not like, and I think it can be simple, like they told their hitters to start hitting fastballs, and so they did. That sounds really obvious, but it's more of they spent several months of the season kind of reestablishing their offensive identity to the league as this team is not going to chase, which is something the White Sox offense had chased since 2014, I think is when I looked it up. They had not been outside of the bottom 10 of O-swing. So like several rebuilds, several roster iterations, like basically since Prime Call Konerko like faded off the map, like they've been a chase happy offense. So in them reestablishing a new offensive identity, you really saw in June a crest of other teams just like, well, let's attack them in the zone. We don't want to walk them. We don't think they have the thump to or perform well enough against us to get burned there. Let's challenge them. And so this is the product of maybe month and a half emphasis of like, here's how they're attacking us now. We've got to do something. Getting super reiterated out of the All-Star break. Like, hey, this is what we want our second half offense to look like. This is what can't continue. And then seeing it executed initially from what we thought was just really bad Pirates pitching. Like, you know, we've seen Andrew Heaney over the years a few times. That's as bad as I've seen him, you know, sitting 87, 89. But to then go in Tampa and send Taj Bradley to the minors, pretty talented pitcher, on top of, you know, Shane Baz, if not a dominant pitcher at this point in the league, a hard throwing righty with a slider that they typically have struggled with a lot. To rough those guys up, that seems like a big jump in execution where I can understand how this is processed as like they had a team meeting, now they're world killers, because it's been quite an about face from, hey, we want to do better at this, to now we're eating everyone's lunch all of a sudden.
Yeah, because I tweeted this and I put it on Blue Sky. Pre-All-Star break, 97 games into the season, the White Sox as a team had a 638 OPS. That was the lowest in Major League Baseball. They're averaging just 3.42 runs per game. The White Sox offense was going to win me a steak dinner. Post All-Star break, in 6 games, the White Sox team OPS is 850. That's second in Major League Baseball. They're averaging 8.16 runs per game. And now they're going to cost me a steak dinner if they don't fall back to earth, which I'm fine. Like, I'll be more than happy to pay for a steak dinner if the White Sox are going to score, on average, 8 runs per game the rest of the season. But what I like about this offensive surge, James, is that it's a lot of this offensive production's coming from the kids. The kids are hitting. And Colson Montgomery had a big moment on Wednesday. He tied the game when the White Sox were down 4-0, and they scored a run. He had a big 3-run homer. He almost hit his first grand slam of his career. He settled for a 2-run double, so he drove in 5 RBIs, and the White Sox win on Wednesday. But what's funny to me is that we talked about Montgomery's struggles in AAA, and why is he not hitting AAA pitching? And his OPS in Charlotte was 711. That's not good. In Chicago, in the majors so far, he's got an 822 OPS with the White Sox. Any thoughts on why Montgomery is faring better against Major League pitching than what we saw him against AAA pitching?
I mean, one, he was obviously lost in the first part of the season and was just kind of the Colson Montgomery who came back as a better hitter than, what's been overall the season. So like he'd probably be trending towards, like, if he was still in Charlotte now over the past weeks, I'd imagine his performance be somewhere where we're calling for it's kind of weird he's not up yet every night. Like, I think he was on an upward trend there in general. He's not chasing is the big thing. That was what made it really abnormal at the start of the season, is that all of a sudden backfoot breaking balls were an anathema to him, which he would not, even if we thought the plate discipline stats were going to slip a little bit as he got upper level competition, this was not even an issue at the lower level minors that hinted at it. Like, this weird lapse of discipline that seemed to be based off him just being out of sync kind of got put down in a way that's held steady since he got called to the majors, where he doesn't have this big flaw where he can like be located on. And I think it helps because he's been getting pitched in a lot to kind of controvert, how much power he has when he's extended. And the fact he kind of reaches out low away from him pretty well. So for him to not be chasing breaking balls that are diving off of that, I think that's really helped him so far on like a granular setup. But because in talking to him, there's not like a big mechanical difference other than just like knowing what his key is to not chase a below the zone, kind of staying tall. But I can't speak for him mentally. He says the biggest difference is mentally. I can't get inside his head, but the performance lends credence to him and Josh Barfield saying like, this kind of the central challenge of this dude's career the last 18 months has been like proving he's big league ready, or like he was only supposed to be in Charlotte for a hot minute. He's just supposed to get hot and he'll be up there. And now that that's done, it does seem like it's a little mental hurdle off of him, which he can kind of just be. And he's held his own. I think he was holding his own pretty well as a player before the power is going to show up. But the main reason to be excited about this dude is the balls go a long way when you hit them. So to see that incorporated, and also him providing a floor for himself where he's been playable up until these last 2 days, about as encouraging as I think you could have hoped for, especially given the tumults of the last 18 months of Colson Montgomery's development.
His bat speed's pretty impressive, James. Like looking on Baseball Savant, he's averaging 76.5 miles per hour with his bat swing.
He's anything like you can measure physically. I think you're probably going to be pretty happy with him. Like as far as being a Statcast darling, like his bat speed looking legit, I think that's going to be a consistent source of encouragement. Whereas, I think in trying to like gear your mind towards like an Andrew Vaughn turnaround and seeing like the bat speed metrics like being pedestrian, it's like, all right, do we trust him to be like just so locked in on getting the sweet spot as a hitter that he's going to be able to perform at this high threshold? Whereas Colson, like, in addition to having more physical or defensive versatility, which I think is our next topic, he's going to consistently flash his physical ability to suggest like monstrous performance is accessible at some point.
Yeah, I wonder if the adjustment for opposing pitchers is to start throwing him first pitch changeups and breaking pitches, because with that type of bat speed, and to your point that you just made, James, when he connects with the fastball, it's going. And with that type of well above average bat speed from Montgomery, for White Sox fans wondering where is the power coming from, Colson Montgomery so far, especially in the series against Tampa Bay, has shown that he can provide it. Now, defensively for Colson Montgomery, he has been splitting time between shortstop and third. Like one game is at third, the next game he's at shortstop, and he keeps bouncing back and forth between these two defensive positions. Asking to put your analysis hat on, James, how do you like this type of defensive arrangement and the way that Will Venable and the White Sox coaching staff is divvying up defensive playing time for Montgomery?
I think it's mostly fine. I think he's been better at shortstop than maybe, especially given the years early as a prospect we spent wondering that being the big question about him. I think he's fine as a shortstop right now. Like if they wanted to make him the everyday dude, I think it seems like his metrics would be fine. Long term, just because how big he is, you think third base is probably something where you can end up long term, not even like in a diss way, more like you're shaped like Manny Machado, why wouldn't you make the same progression sort of way. So having that in the bat, having him playing that a little bit, I think it's mostly harmless, and they are like supposed to be Mr. Defensive Utility, and they do want Chase Mydroff to still be able to play shortstop. And Mydroff at this point is, there's not a second base / shortstop in the mix who's about to dethrone him from everyday appearances. So keeping him kind of active and in the lineup regularly, I think is good. It's amusing that I think the primary reason that Colson's getting pushed to third so much is Lenny and Sosa, which I would not have anticipated. It's more like what their platoon situation, but like they clearly don't want to play Lenine at first anymore, and that limits their ability to shift their infield rotation all the way around if Vargas has to be at first so often. And there's basically like, if you want to play Lenine, you have to push Mydroff off to second base. So there's a little bit of that going around, and also like just their commitment to platooning affecting that a bit. So it's the reasons functionally that Colson Montgomery, this like huge long-term development project, is playing third base, feel a little bit small scale given how important he seems him to be up to this point. But I ultimately don't think like I don't think like they need to like chase this idea of like Colson Montgomery being the everyday shortstop for the next 10 years, live or die, and all other projects are irrelevant next to it. Like you just drafted Julie Carlson. Like there's not that that's like he's moving up the depth chart in any serious way, but like there's alignments to this like core you can see down the future that aren't just like there's no other shortstop candidates. There's no one who's going to move him off defensively by just being better at any point. So I think it's probably fine as long as it gives them more flexibility to basically bat him every day, which is something that you can see Venables very committed to, like putting a platoon sound lineup out there. If this is the tool that allows them to make him more comfortable with like, hey, we'll put lefty on lefty out there and make sure Colson gets every day at bats, maybe it's a good compromise.
Yeah, I think that's a good point as far as the platoon. Montgomery, so far, according to Baseball Savant, again, small sample size alert, 3 runs above average. So he's got a 3 OAA on StatCast, and he's showing positive results both at shortstop and third. It's amazing. It's like Colson Montgomery, the major league player, is completely different than Colson Montgomery, the minor league player, in the best way possible. Usually, when someone's playing that poorly in AAA, it's like, oh, this is not going to look good in the major leagues. Well, Montgomery's been way better with the White Sox than he's been with the Knights. So a nice change of pace for the White Sox.
You just realized that you needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other job sites. Indeed sponsored jobs help you stand out and hire fast. With sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates so you can reach the people that you want faster. And it makes a huge difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Plus, with Indeed sponsored jobs, there's no monthly subscriptions, no long-term contracts, and you only pay for results. How fast is Indeed? Well, in the minute I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/BWN. Just go to Indeed.com/BWN right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/BWN. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Another rookie that's been playing well is Kyle Teel. Teel had his first 4-hit game, almost a 5-hit game against Tampa on Wednesday. He also hit his first career home run. He was just a foot away from hitting his first career home run in Pittsburgh, but Teel is finally on the board with his first home run. However, that's all good after the All-Star break. Teel's got 2 extra base hits in the month of July total, and that has come after the post-All-Star break. Is Teel an example, of James, of when you mentioned that the White Sox want their hitters to be more aggressive, especially against fastballs? Like, Teel has proven with his high on-base percentage that he understands the strike zone. And he gets on base at a really high clip. He's in the 380s right now on base percentage, which is very refreshing for a White Sox hitter. But his ISO is below 100. And that's what's been a bit surprising for me in his first 100 plate appearances, is just how few extra base hits Kyle Teel has at this moment. But is that changing since the All-Star break, that the White Sox want Teel to be more aggressive?
I would say he's more, it applies to everyone and thus it applies to him, rather than he's maybe example 1A. He's downplayed it. Will Venable mentioned it, but like there's been a little bit stuff that's like his leg kick getting a little smaller or a little bit more refined. He described it more as basic maintenance, like the way it gets bigger, gets smaller over the course of like the season, like it naturally would, more than a specific emphasis. But that would be something that would have him. I mean, you saw Andrew Vaughn's like leg kick like shrink over time in response to big league velocity. Like I think that happens to a lot of young hitters. They like Matt Shaw of the North Side has been, messing with like, obviously you don't want that level of like changes, but like it's pretty natural to see, I think, a player come up to the majors and then you see some of their loading movements get a little bit smaller in response to like, oh yeah, everyone throws 95.
Well,
here.
a good example is with the St. Louis Cardinals, JJ Weatherhold, who's absolutely mashing in AAA. His swing looks completely different from the Weatherhold that I scouted for us at Sox Machine when he was at West Virginia last year. Like, he's really cut down that leg kick.
It's funny because I wrote him up for Fangraphs, but like I hadn't watched him in college a lot, so like Eric was a little skeptical on him. I was just watching him in AA video. I was like, this guy can hit. I don't know what the
it's
issue
a different
is.
swing, but yeah, it's to your point. Like, adjustments do get made when you get into professionals. You can't have that. Oh man, who used to have the highest leg kicks when we were kids watching the 90s? Like, no, not Julio Franco didn't have much of a leg kick. I'm trying to remember who had the most ridiculous leg kicks back in the day. They'll come to me.
I feel like Warren Newsom got it up there. But.
Yes, that's him. Yes, the Deacon, Warren. He had a huge leg kick. Like, it was like he was on his just a back foot, just like loading up as the pitch was coming in. Yeah, you don't see that often these days.
And that's very like a more guy who's, as Newsom drawing walks, who's kind of seeing it deep a little bit and making sure he doesn't chase. And so that's the general mindset of like the White Sox, like obviously got a lot better chasing, but have a lot of those guys who tend to be a little bit late on heaters. I think Caro, so looking at like the Statcast like run values for four seamers, like Tachman, Caro, Mydroth, and Teel are like their top. So like Luis Robert, somebody who's I think a good example of like has become overly like breaking ball conscious to the point where you see him beat on heaters and just not perform at the way he obviously could bat speed wise. And Michael A. Taylor and Austin Slater were a little bit guilty of that. That certainly when Tim Melco struggled, you see him getting beat on the zone and fastball. So he's clearly he's been working on his chase all year. You saw that as a little conscious of that and thus a little vulnerable in the zone since coming here. And, it's something where Vargas's numbers look a little meh on the season because he's had these periods where like he's super vulnerable to it and then kind of patches it up and then he went through another cold spot, but is looking a little better now. So I think it's Teel certainly is someone who they want to hit for power. That's kind of his game has shifted a little bit more towards power over hit as he's come up as a prospect and, has that left-handed thump that would be, you haven't seen play in this ballpark as much as left-handed power can. So he's a target for it, but I don't think he's a particularly egregious. I feel like he's going through more rookie stuff than your approach isn't fastball oriented more than anyone else.
Yeah, again, 13% walk rate. He's doing a good job getting on base. The ISO is what jumped out at me as like, okay, that's not what I was expecting from Kyle Teel. But again, it's just his first 100 plate appearances as a major leaguer. And since the post All-Star break, he's got a home run and he's got a double so far, and he picked up 4 hits. So we'll see if we get more power from Kyle Teel moving forward as the White Sox toward offensive stretch continues. And someone that's also helping power this offensive stretch, and it's a good sign because Miguel Vargas, James, had a really bad 100 plate appearances before the All-Star break, and he snapped out in a big way so far. Post All-Star break, Vargas is 7 for 24 with 3 doubles, 2 home runs. He's got 5 walks to 4 strikeouts. When you look at his monthly numbers, though, this is how bad Vargas was at the beginning part of July. Despite this hot streak that Vargas is on, for the month of July, he's still batting below 200. He's at a 197 batting average, 280 on base percentage, slugging 364 for the month of July, when you include how well he's been hitting. So that's kind of how cold Miguel Vargas was. But now that he's heating up again, is this back to the conversation we had earlier in the season that you got to watch Vargas's hands, and it's the hand placement that's driving his success, or is there something else that's spurring this hot streak for Miguel Vargas?
So Vargas is kind of like Vargas's hand placement is kind of like the team meeting for the fastball emphasis. Like,
okay,
the hand placement doesn't click until he changes his body over the offseason, and now he can generate as much force as a swing without the big load movement that he had when he was lighter and weaker last season. And now you can kind of be more creative or need less room or space for him to kind of start his barrel. It did seem like he was getting beaten by fastballs in the zone. It was slipping at portions, right before the All-Star break. And you saw him get beaten in the zone just the other night in a way that looked a little bit troubling. So it's been a bit more high maintenance of recent than kind of one fix and you never think about it again. But I also think like this is the most regular playing time he's gotten in a while, and he thinks it was a good time for the All-Star break. I think for a lot of the young players that they're playing every day for the first time, and I think both Mydroth and Vargas a little bit when they were being like really kind of launched into being everyday players who bat at the top of the order all the time. And you see them kind of go through these like peaks and valleys of one getting adjusted to, but also adjusting to like playing 6 times a week through bangs and bruises. So I think a little bit of rest probably helps. Also swing has a lot of upkeep to it, but he doesn't have like, he's driving the ball in a way where it produces power and he makes contact. He does not have like this super raw power like that's going to play well above average. Like it seems like if he gets hot enough, he should reach 20 home runs this year, but his like 95% great contact doesn't like get over the wall necessarily. He's more of a guy who's got to barrel up, and like I feel like he went through a stretch where like you'd see a lot of like well struck lineouts and flyouts that just didn't have like a ton of juice behind it to like really threaten to be extra base hits. He's got to like really crush it to have an impact. So I think this could be the nature of him a little bit of ups and downs with power production. Cause I think it'll come and go in a little bit cause he just doesn't have like this, above average raw pop. So if he's a little bit off, like you're not really going to see the homers. But I also think like his chase went up in portions of the season, but I didn't feel like it fell apart. Or you didn't see like the spikes of like 30% strikeout rate that you saw last season. So I'm settling more into like maybe Vargas is like a 750, 800 OPS guy, and that would be solid. And there just isn't like the massive ceiling that was suggested by his initial breakout, or just seeing like, is he still kind of figuring out like how consistent what he needs to do for this swing to be super consistent? We're still kind of figuring out what he is. I feel like maybe we're not close enough to what the prime would be to rule out there's a bigger ceiling, but also like it's not going to come like he just grows into like 30 home run power. It's maybe getting super consistent with being able to cover the top of the zone and, pick up more hits, field low line drives.
The thing that surprised me when looking at Vargas' season numbers, James, is that his BABIP is below 250. And I feel that's low.
It is because he has kind of like an uppercut power hitter style of his contact a lot. But it's not backed by as much, like it's not 60 juice. It's like more like 45, 50.
Yeah, that's odd. I know we mentioned it, but it kind of feels like Avisail Garcia. Like, why can't Avi consistently hit 30 home runs? Because Avi kept hitting the ball
Avi
on the
hit
ground.
the ball on the ground.
Yeah. But now this is opposite. Like, Vargas is hitting the ball in the air. Why is it not flying?
Like a ton. Like under 30% ground ball.
Right. So, yeah, his BABIP just below 250, which in a way suggests, man, if he can get his BABIP up to 300, maybe he's a 250 hitter, and then he's picking up some additional points in the slugging, and like to your point, he's getting closer to an 800 OPS. But according to Fangraphs, for the season, Vargas is currently at 98 weighted runs created plus, which is a lot better than last year, but he's still slightly below league average offensively. We'll see if he can continue this hot streak with this upcoming homestand for the White Sox. So they play against the Cubs and Phillies. And we'll preview that White Sox-Cubs series in a moment in this podcast.
You just realized that you needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other job sites. Indeed sponsored jobs help you stand out and hire fast. With sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates so you can reach the people that you want faster. And it makes a huge difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Plus, with Indeed sponsored jobs, there's no monthly subscriptions, no long-term contracts, and you only pay for results. How fast is Indeed? Well, in the minute I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/BWN. Just go to Indeed.com/BWN right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/BWN. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
But we are recording this podcast a week away from the MLB trade deadline. So again, this is going to be July 31st at 5 p.m. Central Time. We haven't seen a lot of activity, really the big blockbuster, and I'm not sure any trades in the upcoming week are going to beat out the deal between the Boston Red Sox and the San Francisco Giants for Rafael Devers. But Luis Robert, written quite a bit. We talked about in our previous episode, what is Robert's trade stock after the series against Pittsburgh? He did set out a game against Tampa Bay, but Robert in 2 games against the Rays went 3 for 8 with 3 RBIs. In his last 30 games, Robert is batting .258 with a .339 on base percentage and slugging .443. If that was his season slash line, I think that would be acceptable. In his last 15 games, though, much more encouraging. He's batting .298 with a .400 on base percentage and slugging .511. That's a star level type of slash line that we've seen from Luis Robert in the last 15 games. And because of just not knowing any certainty if Robert is going to get dealt or not in the next week, we got this question from Chris on Blue Sky. And Chris wrote to us, I feel Luis Robert will get traded, but if not, what do the White Sox do? Do they pick up the option or do they buy out for the 2026 season? And then Chris added, it feels like a waste if they buy him out and get nothing, but also feels like a waste if they pay him $20 million in 2026 and he underperforms again. It is a possibility, James. A week from now, Luis Robert is still with the White Sox because Chris Getz could not get a deal done or didn't get a package in return that he felt was satisfying to trade Luis Robert away. From your perspective, if this happens, that Luis Robert does not get traded in a week, what do you think could happen after this season with Robert and the White Sox?
I think he will get traded, for one. For two, we talked about no blockbusters. Naylor just got traded to the Mariners while you were
Josh Naylor?
introducing your
Wow.
While you were introducing your topic.
Okay. All right.
I think like if they are not trading him at the deadline on the basis of like we think this deal basically isn't worth doing based on the caliber prospect package we're getting, you're kind of making that decision weighing against like what the risk entails of bringing him back. I think like the idea of just like punting and buying out like serves no purpose. Like you did not save money, nor did you get anything for it. So I think you'd have to be weighing it against just picking up the option and rolling again, so to speak.
Okay.
I find the give up, take your ball and go home and then cry at home route to be unlikely to be followed. Probably deserving of a lot of criticism if they did.
I could see.
I guess it'd be taking your ball, going home, and then going home and deflating the ball. That would be how the metaphor.
Yeah,
buying him out.
The $20 million is up to Jerry Reinsdorf, right? Like Chris Getz has to ask Jerry for approval to spend $20 million on Luis Robert the next season. If Jerry says no, well, then your decision's been made. You got to buy him out for $2 million. But maybe the White Sox in their minds think, okay, well, hey, Robert, we're not going to bring you back for $20 million, but we're going to give you $2 million. And would you sign a 1-year, $10 million deal? It's kind of like a prove it deal. Yeah, it's not $20 million, but you're going to get $12 million in 2026 in case that if you do hit free agency and you don't like any of the offers are given to you, you could always come back and play with the White Sox. I mean, I guess that is a possibility, but
just like at that point, is that a particularly like once he's out of your control, like is that a unique opportunity and thus is 110 for Robert like the best lottery swing you could do? Also, he's a Boris client. He can come back, but he's not going to like sign 2 days off of the season for like 110. I think he'll probably at least see what the market will bear. So I don't know. Like, it wouldn't be a gimme putt. You'd have to prepare a lot of other plans if you're going to see that route.
That deal would sign on February 12th, James, with Robert and the White Sox.
Like, you need to write other center field names on the board, mapping out your offseason if you went that route. So I think he gets traded. I think there's like legit interest in him in a way that, like, he has had a bad season, but he's had a season where he kind of staked out what his role is. Like, it's defense, base running, and hits lefties. That's going to like get a muted sort of investment from contenders who would see him as a role player, and also probably are more of the mind of like, hey, we're already spending money, we'll pick up that salary for you, rather than, normally I think like for a team like the Phillies, like the bigger question is like, are we going to burn through all our prospect capital trying to contend year after year? Whereas like we're, throwing money out the door. I think picking up the remainder of the Robert contract and not having to offer much talent probably looks like as a, appealing, like, swing at, with his ceiling for them. So I think there'll be a market there, but I think if you were deciding not to, you're deciding to spin again. Otherwise, like, what's the point?
Yeah, I have a hard time seeing Jerry Reinsdorf approving a $20 million contract for Luis Robert in 2026.
Same. I think that would be reason to trade him. But I bet they'd give him a phone call before not trading him and seeing where it's going to go at the end of the season.
So let's spin it the other way. So Chris, to your concern, James and I feel like Robert's getting dealt in the next week. But with Getz, I got to imagine other teams have the same suspicion that we have, James. And I feel like that makes negotiating for Getz difficult. Like, he doesn't have a whole lot of leverage here because teams can just run up to the clock unless somebody has a desperate need because their everyday center fielder got seriously injured and they're going to miss months, maybe the rest of the season, and they desperately need a center fielder to come in and play right away for them. And maybe that's the best hope for the White Sox, unfortunately, at the expense of somebody getting injured. But I guess from Getz, he's just going to have to take the best deal available before the deadline. Is that the way he's going to have to play this, James?
I mean, it's also like they could have set what their threshold is, and once they get it, like, move forward. And I think that threshold probably has to have adjusted from.
Do you think that's how he handled the winter meetings with Crochet? That Boston met his threshold?
Yeah. Like the offer, I mean, we obviously have heard of that a lot, that the initial versions of the offer didn't include Brady Montgomery, but Chase Mydrop as a second piece. I don't know if that's specifically the switch that flipped from, I think it was actually from hearing, but like the offer jumped up to what the version of that they finished with after the Max Fried signing. And so that's kind of a clear.
That's right.
Obviously it was not like.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I've like some proprietary systems that teams have proprietary systems where they can enter a trade offer into a system and it spits out like 90 points and that meets your threshold. But I think it's more about like having an idea of like what they feel comfortable walking away with. And if something happens, like, I think it has to have tilted down from spring training if this is going to happen at the deadline. But I can only imagine it is. And I think you have to kind of like put the financials into that scaling of, what you're up against, and what sort of risk you have to incur if you don't accept what's available to them.
Yeah, and to go back to what I just said, podcast listeners, dumb. Yes, obviously Chris Getz is going to try to take the best deal available for Luis Robert. I wonder if that's going to be pitchers. Like, here's our high-ranking pitchers, which White Sox fans will be like, we need more position players. That's what we're hoping to get from a Luis Robert trade. But if that's the best that's being offered to you as you get inch closer to the deadline, I think you just got to take it so you can avoid this financial decision.
They've even like indicated like, well, maybe one route of how we solve like where do we get innings from to the second half is that what we get in return is like essentially either a MLB ready pitching prospect or maybe like a post hype guy who's like, just needs a shot at a rotation, and that's what you're returning. That becomes part of like how you solve the, who gets starts in the last 2 months of the season. So yeah, they don't have the sort of singular asset to be like set the terms for like who comes up to them. I think if there's suitable value, like, I've been talking to scouts who are talking about like they're going to get a lot of calls on, small level things on their relievers because, segueing to another point on your agenda, like the bullpen's been good, like, but I think if someone comes calling to you about, Dan Altavilla, you're not like, I only want a switch hitting catcher. Like, I think you kind of see what they're willing to offer if the value like lines up, you do it, not like, hey, we're only looking for lefty corner outfielders or something like that.
Well, Chris, it was a very good question. So thank you so much for reaching out and sending that question to us on Blue Sky. If you are on Blue Sky, we are there at soxmachine.com. You can follow James at jrfegan.soxmachine.com, and I am there at josh.soxmachine.com. But very timely question, Chris, but James and I both agree that Luis Robert is getting dealt in the next week, because if he doesn't, we don't foresee Jerry Reinsdorf approving a $20 million club option pickup for Chris Getz to add Luis Robert to the 2026 roster, which naturally raises questions that I can hear from you podcast listeners. Well, who are you going to be spending money on? And that is a discussion for October, not in July at this moment. A Sox Machine public service announcement. We have brand new items in the Sox Machine store. With the weather heating up, we've got new Adidas Sox Machine polos, perfect for your company outings, casual Fridays, and of course the golf course. It's part of our media attire as well when covering events. You can grab any of these 3 styles that we now have in the store. We've got new Sox Machine coffee mugs to sip from while you read Jim and James in the morning, new stainless steel water bottles with the Sox Machine logo, and fanny packs, which fanny packs have been very helpful entering Major League Baseball stadiums with all the bag restrictions. Visit shop.soxmachine.com to check out the new gear. And for Sox Machine subscribers, remember your discount code to get an additional discount when checking out. Again, the URL is shop.soxmachine.com.
You just realized that you needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other job sites. Indeed sponsored jobs help you stand out and hire fast. With sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates so you can reach the people that you want faster. And it makes a huge difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Plus, with Indeed sponsored jobs, there's no monthly subscriptions, no long-term contracts, and you only pay for results. How fast is Indeed? Well, in the minute I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/BWN. Just go to Indeed.com/BWN right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/BWN. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
For the White Sox, let's see if they can continue their hot streak hitting, because they are facing one of the best offenses in Major League Baseball, which should be a very rowdy and festive crowd this weekend at Wright Field as the Chicago Cubs visit the South Side. The Cubs are playing really good baseball. They are 60-42 on the season. They're in second place in the National League Central because the Milwaukee Brewers refuse to lose, as the Cubs are now 1 game back of the Brew Crew. In their last 10 games, the Cubs are 6-4. That's good. Milwaukee's 9-1. So that's the issue for the Cubs right now, as they have a week before the trade deadline. And suddenly, wondering how we're going to beat the Dodgers, Phillies, and Mets. Now they have to wonder, can we continue keeping pace with the Milwaukee Brewers? What we got to do. Away from Wrigley Field this year, the Cubs are 27-23. For the season series, the Cubs swept the White Sox handedly at Wrigley Field, outscoring the White Sox 26-8 in 3 games. On the road this year, the Chicago Cubs team OPS is 786. That's the second best hitting team on the road this year in Major League Baseball. Away from Wrigley Field, the Cubs have hit 85 home runs. That's the most road home runs hit by a Major League Baseball team this year. And the Cubs are averaging 5.44 runs per game away from Wrigley Field. Their staff ERA is slightly below 4 at 3.99. That's good for 8th in Major League Baseball away from Wrigley Field. So looking at the numbers and the metrics, the Cubs are performing really well away from Wrigley Field. You would usually think Cubs having a great offense. That's mostly because of their home ballpark, and that is not the case in 2025. Your pitching probables for this series, Friday night at 6:40 p.m. Central Time. This is a firework night at Wrigley Field. Shota Imanaga will take the ball for the Chicago Cubs, the lefty against Adrian Houser. Saturday night, 6:10 p.m. Central Time, our friends PSA, Chicago Sports Bums, they are hosting a tailgate in Lot B that you could check out. So with the parking lots opening up around 3:10, 3 hours before first pitch, you can go visit the Bums, look for their flag in Lot B. There's going to be a lot of White Sox fans there. I'll be making an appearance. So if you got nothing to do on Saturday afternoon, you can join everyone in their tailgate party. The starting pitchers for Saturday at 6:10 p.m. Central Time will be Cade Horton for the Cubs against Aaron Savali for the White Sox. Sunday at 1:10 p.m. Central Time, the Cubs don't know yet. That's to be announced. Sean Burke will take the ball for the Chicago White Sox. From a White Sox perspective in this series, James, and Jim and I highlighted it in our previous podcast episode, talking about Adrian Houser's trade stock. It wasn't a great start against the Pittsburgh Pirates. He did allow 10 hits. He did not get through 5 innings. Now he's got an opportunity. As I mentioned just a little bit ago, the Cubs are a great offense, one of the best offenses in Major League Baseball. Is this the start that decides the trade fate for Adrian Houser?
I think it's, let me say, I'll lean on the side of saying it's his last start in the White Sox uniform.
Okay.
It's because
regardless, no matter how he does.
Yeah, I think he's kind of in position to get moved. Well, leads into my point. I don't think like Adrian Houser is not like a rookie. And while this like run results wise has been, maybe as good as any point in his career, like we've seen an effective Adrian Houser before. He threw 7 scoreless innings, I believe, in Sox Park. I want to say in the COVID season. I think in part of saying like pump your brakes on your expectations a little bit. Like I think the league understands this is like a back end sinker baller who, generates a lot of, low level contact. I don't think that we've tricked everyone into thinking he's, a game 1 starter. And I don't think like him getting mopped by like the Cubs offense necessarily would be like, oh man, he's so much worse than I thought he was. Generally, I like obviously what he's done performance wise elevates it. And it's been very impressive how his secondaries have played and how well he's thrown strikes. But I think if his stuff was still up in Pittsburgh, like he hit some 97s. It was a really hot night. So I think like with what he's done, like obviously if he does like James Shields right before he got traded to the White Sox, like 10 runs in 2 innings sort of thing, I think it was a little bit harder to like wave away. But I think if like he has, 4 runs in 5 innings, it's not like fraud. And maybe it helps a little bit if he has another like dominant outing. But I think he's already trending towards like, hey, that guy can come in and then be part of a rotation down the stretch, and then maybe game 3 if he's really rolling, sort of setup. I don't think there's as much room to move out of like how the league views him as it might feel like start to start. It'll obviously help if he deals. It obviously hurts a little bit if he gets roughed around, but if his like velo is still good, he's still healthy. I don't see him falling out of like trade eligible or trade worthy, and I don't see him, leaping up to like, hey, we traded for this guy to top our rotation sort of like tier. Not that there's really those dudes out there, but between like how much control he has, being a veteran, being kind of established, I think he's a lot more like good rotation patch than like this is our big get to head things up down the stretch. I don't think he can launch themselves in that tier, even with like 7 scoreless against the Cubs.
Got it. So Houser would be on track of making the final start against the Philadelphia Phillies on July 30th to end that homestand. So what you're thinking, James, is that no matter what happens on Friday,
like
Houser,
I think if you're trying to trade for Houser, like he's one of your targets, letting him like make a start before the deadline, the day before the deadline, it's kind of like, I think that'd probably be a good inflection point for Chris Getz to be like, hey, do you really want him to do this? Like, let's just get this done. Sort of situation. Like,
so it could be hug watch.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty natural point to be a little bit like, hey, like, let's not make me do something I don't want to do, and making this guy start the day before the deadline.
Yeah.
Let's all come to our senses and get this done. Hopefully it's something normal and not like someone jogging out to get him as he's like warming up in the bullpen. But I don't know. So, something like Tyler Alexander having to throw 5 innings because Houser got traded feels like a natural way for the script to go for that day.
Yeah, I was mentioning, it's like if Houser's got like 5 scoreless innings and only 60 pitches, and then he gets pulled, just watch for the hugs. Someone made a trade. Chris Getz is not talking to you guys right before the Cubs series.
Yeah, and let's one, there's no like hard and fast rule about like talking the first day of the homestand. It's just kind of more like a way they distribute them that usually winds up making sense. But also, like, I can recall several recon deadlines where like at this close to the deadline, it was just like, he's gonna hold off until afterwards because there is going to be a post deadline address, unless there's a trade. So obviously, if they get busy, then he'll talk rather than like it could be a silly situation where he talks and previews like the trade deadline and then is talking to us again 6 hours later because he traded a reliever. So yeah, I think we will talk to Chris Getz before the deadline, but not scheduled before Friday.
So we'll see how Adrian Houser does. Hopefully the White Sox hitters continue to mash, because if the Cubs continue to live up to their numbers away from Wrigley Field, runs are going to be needed for the White Sox. Again, they allowed 26 runs to the Cubs at Wrigley Field earlier this year in a 3-game sweep by the Cubs over the Chicago White Sox. But our last point, before we sign off on this podcast episode, something that caught my attention while researching for this episode. And I know that I'm at the risk of jinxing the relievers. And if they get bad this weekend, I guess you could point the finger and blame me. But for the season, the White Sox bullpen now ranks 16th according to Fangraphs WAR. But this is what surprises me, James. Since June 1st, the White Sox bullpen ranks 11th in Major League Baseball regarding FIP, fielding independent pitching, and 4th via WAR on Fangraphs. So since June 1st, you can make the argument that the White Sox bullpen is a top 5 unit. James Fegan, have the White Sox relievers fixed their issues? And why are they performing so much better now?
So there's now that I've like been able to use your introduction to look at the Fangraphs WAR leaderboard for the White Sox bullpen since June 1st. The primary answer is the one I could have expected. Grant Taylor leads the White Sox bullpen in FWAR since June 1st. Grant Taylor has a style of pitching that I believe Fangraphs WAR metric is quite fond of. Longtime friendly relations with this manner of chucking the ball really hard, missing bats. Tyler Alexander's been excellent on this. They've been like it's oddly enough, we talked to Matt Wise in Pittsburgh about it, and he's like, yeah, we kind of spent 6 months or 6 weeks trying to figure out what we had leverage wise. I forget which, so you saw them go through, I mean, really kind of out of opening day, the message from like the pitching group was like, relief wise, high leverage. We got Clevenger, we got Boozer, and then we'll figure out from there. It'll be more about finding pockets after those two. So obviously those two didn't stick as like their primary late inning leverage guys. One held on a bit longer than the other, but both are not really, part of that late mix now. In terms of seeing one, Steven Wilson didn't really get called up until April. And while he doesn't quite look like pre-trade Steven Wilson yet in terms of velocity and like that four seamer really playing, he knows what he's doing out there. He's commanding the ball, even if he doesn't have like the biggest stuff he's had in his career, and he's getting by. I think he might himself. I think he could get traded pretty easily this deadline. Not like a huge haul, but like, hey, we need a seventh inning righty that looks like the part. He's done it before. He's throwing the ball where he wants. Let's do it. I think Leisure, while he gets a lot of like criticism here because he hasn't like ascended to that like closer status, like the way it seemed like he really was exciting to be because of the raw ingredients, he's become like a good. I don't know, like if it matches up for him to get traded, like in terms of like reliability and also like how much service time he has left. Maybe you'd want to see him get to a better version of himself before you consider that. But he's pretty good against righties. Like he knows what he's doing to the slider a lot more than last year. They had a lot of guys who are like pitching like to be like medium leverage. And now that not that Grant Taylor's been flawless, but certainly gives you a much more credible throw him at the teeth of the offense. Sort of role that has become in vogue even after, even if it's not as like committed to it as Grifol was with like Ronaldo Lopez or Michael Kopech at times. He's been able to tackle that role sensibly enough that it's allowed everyone to filter down into a bit more logical landing spots. Like obviously, would it be because it's airing on Friday? We're talking about Wednesday's game. Wednesday night, seeing Taylor get used at a leverage spot kind of early, saw them like really piece together the last two innings of that game in a way that was probably a bit more herky-jerky than it had been for a while. And I think that's the result of seeing kind of guys getting filtered in the role. You weren't forcing guys who had been mostly working sixth and seventh into the eighth and ninth as often over the last 2 months as you were in the early parts of the season, where it's clearly like auditions happening all the time. Whereas the Wilson, Gilbert, Altavilla bridge to the end of the game on Wednesday seemed a lot more like we're at the end of a road trip and we've been kind of winning more than we're used to and have exhausted a lot of leverage options. This is weird. We didn't expect this, but hey, this is the card we're dealt. So I think they figured things out mix wise, even if there's not like there's no one's next closer or even eighth inning guy that they'd really like are going to trade this deadline. But I think they have had everyone kind of performing well enough where I think opposing teams will be like, hey, that guy can pitch the sixth or seventh for us right now. It'll deepen us, even if it doesn't like give us a new, high leverage top dog. So bully on them for building trade assets.
So you're guessing that we're going to be busy at Sox Machine in the next week because Houser, Robert, you're mentioning maybe a couple of bullpen guys. We didn't talk about Mike Talkman in this episode. 4.5 trades, James. Over under 4.5 trades by the White Sox in the next week.
I'll go under trades, but over for people.
Oh, okay. So packaging people again, like last year with Eric.
5 trades is a lot to see in the deadline.
It is a lot. It is a lot. Well, so the Dodgers and Cardinals, which we didn't talk about Eric Fetty getting DFA, but we can save that after the aftermath of the trade. If the White Sox still need help in the starting rotation, maybe they bring back old friend Eric Fetty, because if you didn't get a chance to read Jim's report from Nashville on Noah Syndergaard, not promising. The White Sox may need help getting innings for the rest of the year. But okay, so you're saying over 4.5 players on the current White Sox 26-man roster are going to get dealt before the deadline.
So like if you took like Robert and Houser and
That's
then
two.
like I'd say 2 relievers.
Okay.
And then it's like a coin flip on Savali, or like someone wants Michael A. Taylor to be their fourth outfielder because he's, hit lefties pretty well this year, or someone wants Austin Taylor, or not Austin. I'm combining them now. What if they're like combined? They'd be that'd be a kick-ass player. Austin Slater and Michael Taylor both have like this clear, like they're role players in a way that almost doesn't fit a rebuilding team. Like I think they'd fit pretty easily, like as a small deal, even like a cash consideration swap is like, hey, Slater can easily come hit lefties off the bench for like a contending team. And, Taylor can easily like, pop against, lefties and to be a late inning defensive replacement for a playoff team. Like those aren't like a little bit empty calories in terms of like getting fans excited for what you're getting in the trade deadline. That's really like the, good AAA reliever type of returns or A-ball lottery ticket. But I think they have enough of those guys sprinkled out where I can get to 5 without, promising the world.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's see if James is right. Get another trade where the White Sox are including, last year is Kopech, Pham, Fetty. So 3 players in 1 trade between the Dodgers.
I don't like to directly conjure that because I think that gives people more concern than excitement. But
I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I was just trying to reminisce on how many players actually got traded by the White Sox last year, even though it wasn't that many trades conducted by the White Sox. So under 4.5 total trades, but more than 4.5 White Sox players get dealt. Let's see if James is right. We could be very busy at Sox Machine in the upcoming week. Again, continue to visit us daily at SoxMachine.com. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you just discovered the Sox Machine Podcast, you can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. You could also listen and watch our show on YouTube.com/Sox Machine. We also post videos as well. I just was at the Remova Theater at the Remova Grill trying out Gene Honda's new beer that's going to be available at the Craft Cave at Rate Field for White Sox games for the rest of the season. On your feet. The Amber Lager with a hint of lime. Again, you can get that beer at Rate Field. You can get it also at Remova. You can watch my video review, reviewing as far as the beer and also getting a chance to learn more about the beer making process on YouTube.com/Sox Machine. Follow us on social media. We're on all the platforms, including Instagram. We're doing a little bit more with Instagram these days. So if you are on the gram, you can follow us at Sox Machine. You can follow James at JR Fegan. You can follow me at SoxMachine_Josh. And again, we are on Blue Sky at SoxMachine.com. If you enjoy our work, you want full access to all of our coverage of the Chicago White Sox, including all the activity that's coming up with the MLB trade deadline. Subscribe to Sox Machine at SoxMachine.com/products. Monthly rates start at $5. That gets you an ad-free version of both the podcast and the website. We have additional openings as well in our Veterans Committee. So if you want direct access to James and having James text you and what he is hearing from the White Sox clubhouse and at Rate Field days leading up to the trade deadline, you can sign up to be part of our Veterans Committee at SoxMachine.com/products. The Sox Machine Podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com. You're on for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside James Fegan, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.